Okay, friends,
Hello, Bhante.
we're going to start now by starting this Sutta study class by reciting the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa for those who know it. So if you like, you can place your hands here and we'll recite that 3 times. Try to follow my lead. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So again, welcome friends to this first Sutta study night. And I think you all know. How many of you were able to download or to read the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta before now? Just raise your hand. But I'm going to be kind of summarizing this. I'm not going to read everything word by word, but I'm going to be making comments on the reading part of it and then explaining parts of this. And at the end, you'll have a time to ask some questions, but wait until the end.
Yeah, Bhante, we have a friend, a new teacher from Dulen School. So his first day is here today. So I just want to let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So please mute your mics. You can all mute your mics. So this is the first sermon or Dhamma talk of the Buddha, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And basically the meaning of that is, it's translated as turning the wheel of Dhamma or setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. So it was the first sermon or Dhamma talk that the Buddha gave after his enlightenment at Isipatana, the deer park in Benares. So the sutta starts out, thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Sublime One was living at Varanasi in the deer park. Now, the Sublime One, depending on the translation, the Sublime One is one of the epitaphs or names for the Buddha or the Blessed One. Usually you find it the Blessed One or the Sublime One. And he addressed the group of 5 monks. And the group of 5 monks, I want to set the scene a little bit. Now, as most of you probably know, if you've read the life of the Buddha, the Buddha had been wandering around India practicing, studying with different teachers, and then finally he started practicing with some ascetics, but they were practicing largely Hindu practices of self-mortification and just concentration. And so they practice these austerities of fasting the body, living outside all the time, kind of, what is called self-mortification, maybe, sitting out in the hot sun or not wearing clothes and fast, but mainly fasting so that they, with the belief that they could liberate their soul or their consciousness from the body if they were to kind of deny it or torture it. This was a kind of a common belief. And that was called the Atta Kilamattani Yoga, which was one of the extremes. So after practicing that for a long time, the Buddha became so weak from not eating. He was only eating like 1 grain of rice every day or every other day. And it said that he could reach with his hand through his abdomen and touch his backbone, which is how thin he got. And he couldn't hardly sit up straight anymore. He was so weak. So to meditate, he found it difficult sitting up straight. And he found, this is not the way, torturing the body. So he kind of gave up that. And his 4 companions, the other 4 monks, thought that he was backsliding and he was, giving up. And so they kind of shunned him. And so the Buddha went on his own way, and they continued to practice their self-mortification, and he took the middle path. So that's sort of the scene before this first Dhamma talk. Now, after the Buddha's enlightenment, he went to the deer park near Varanasi, Banaras, and there he knew that the 5 monks were sitting there doing their practicing there in this deer park. So he went there because he thought, these 5, they'll probably be able to understand my Dhamma. I can just tweak their minds a little bit, and at least 1 or 2 may get the message. So that's why he went there, to specifically give his first sermon to people that he thought might be able to understand. Because at the time of his enlightenment, he thought to himself, this Dhamma is deep and hard to understand. Maybe no one's going to even understand me. And but then he thought, these 5 monks, out of any of them, they should probably be able to understand. So if you can imagine, and when the Buddha approached these 4 monks, they saw him and they said, here comes a backslider. And they weren't going to get up and greet him, But then as the Buddha approached, his aura vibration was such that those 4 monks couldn't resist, And so they kind of got up and went to greet the Buddha as the custom and take his robe and bowl. And then the Buddha sat down to give them this first sermon. So, and those monks' names, if any of you are interested, they were Bhadya, Vappa, Mahanama, Asaji, and Kondanya. Excuse me, when I said 4, there was actually 5. So there's 5 monks. There were 6, including the Buddha, when they were practicing beforehand. And Asaji and Kondanya will be mentioned again in the last part of the sutta. So he says, bhikkhus, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. The pursuit of sensual pleasures, delight in sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial on the one hand, and then the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial, on the other hand. And that's what he was referring to, addressing these monks, because they also had practiced both of those ways. Beforehand, a lot of them came from good families, so they indulged in sensual pleasures, but at some point they gave it up and started practicing the ascetic life. And so they were practicing this self-mortification. So that's specifically why the Buddha chose this topic to address this first group of monks. So without going towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. So he called this the middle way because it's the middle path between those two extremes of sensory indulgence or in addiction to sensual pleasures, and on the other hand, denying the body or the mind any pleasure at all, and kind of torturing it by denying it and tormenting it by subjecting yourself to these extreme hardships. So what he was talking about was, avoiding those two extremes. And then he said, what bhikkhus is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision and knowledge? And this vision and knowledge are mental insights. They're not an external vision or knowledge. It's the internal deep insight and transformation of consciousness into a different kind of alternate reality, a shift that you might call it a paradigm shift in the consciousness, which is that kind of direct knowledge and direct vision. And basically it was a vision of no self, how the self and the ego was basically an illusion, and being trapped in that illusion of the self, me and others, is the cause of most sufferings, as we may discuss later on. So then he explains the Noble Eightfold Path. What is this middle path? It's the right view and the rest. Again, I'm not going to go over all those individually now, because most of you probably have read it or can easily find out the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So this bhikkhus is that middle way, awakened to by the Tathagata. And the word Tathagata, instead of the Buddha, he called himself the Tathagata, which means one thus gone. That means the mind has gone back to its original pure, uncontaminated nature, or its unconditioned nature, gone back to its original freedom and liberation, the pure Dhamma, which is Nibbana. So he just introduced the Noble Eightfold Path in this first kind of introduction. Now he's going to go on to cover the Four Noble Truths. Now the Eightfold Path is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. But now he's going to explain the Four Noble Truths with their three phases, which is very important. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of suffering. So the Four Noble Truths are the truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. But suffering has three levels to it. So it says birth is suffering, aging, sickness, illness, old age, and death is suffering. So that's one definition of suffering. It's basically the suffering of the body, of being born, but especially of being subject to sickness, old age, disease, and death. So I call that the physical level of suffering, the suffering of the body. And then there's the union with what is displeasing as suffering, or getting what you don't want, having to encounter disagreeable and painful objects of the six senses. And separation from what is pleasing or not getting what you want. So we have desires, we can't get them, so we can't get them, can't satisfy them, or they get taken away from us. So basically it's not getting what you want and getting what you don't want is suffering. And what we want is pleasurable feeling and the objects of the senses that give us pleasurable feeling. And so if you can't get those, you suffer. Shucks, I couldn't get that. And then if you have to experience the pain of the senses, like disagreeable sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and even thoughts, that's getting what you don't want. So there's the struggle to get away from what you don't want, and then the suffering from not getting what you want. So that's more of a mental suffering. So the first was suffering of the body, the nature of it. You get sick, disease, old age, and then death. And then the suffering of the mind, not being able to satisfy its desires and being subject to all kind of aversions and the spin-off mental states from not getting what you want. And then the third one is in brief, he says in brief, or in short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. And that's a little bit more complex that we'll maybe discuss in some other Dhamma talks or suttas. But I think most of you probably know what they are. Basically, it's form, the body, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Everything that we identify as me or mine or myself, basically it's our body and mind. And not only our body and mind, but the aggregates and the physical forms in the external world too. So these are, but that's a little bit harder to understand. And basically it comes from not understand. They're suffering because we don't understand them and we cling to them in the wrong way. We form these attachments and aversions to these aggregates, and therefore we suffer from that. So it's the not understanding them. That's why I call it actually the suffering of ignorance. It's because we don't understand the truth about the mind, then we suffer on account of that. But anyway, so these 5 aggregates of clinging. So those are the 3 definitions of suffering that are mentioned by the Buddha. And then he goes on to the second noble truth, the origin of suffering. So he explains it. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. So basically it's the tanha, or the craving for worldly objects, basically craving for the sensual pleasures. And then there's craving for existence, wanting to live forever, or at least wanting to live one more day to have one more sensual pleasure. Or day by day, people live day by day for sensual pleasure. They wake up, what am I going to pleasure today? What restaurant am I going to go to? What person am I going to caress? Or whatever they imagine. Each day their mind is projecting how they're going to satisfy some sensual pleasure. So that's craving for existence. So we want to live one more day to get more pleasure, or live longer in life in order to satisfy our pleasures. But it also means, if you believe in rebirth, the desire to be reborn also into other realms of pleasure. But that's, we'll talk about that maybe later. So the craving for sensual pleasures, the craving for existence, and then the craving for non-existence. And this means your life is so frustrated or in such a way that you'd like to terminate the life. So basically it's suicidal tendencies, or being so disgusted, unfulfilled with life, you'd wish that you wouldn't live more. So that's the craving for non-existence, not wanting to go on living. And in the ultimate degree, that leads people to, suicide, unfortunately. So that's still a kind of craving, the craving not to exist. So that's why it's also included in the origin and perpetuation of suffering. Now, when it says the truth of the cause of suffering, that means also the continuation of suffering, because we go on repeating the causes of suffering, so suffering continues to, it doesn't just arise, it continues. And it arises in all the time, keeps on arising and passing away with each moment. So it's the craving that gave rise to that, and we'll talk more about that in some other topics. And then this is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless giving up, the forsaking, the fading away, the cessation of that very same craving. The giving up and the relinquishing of the craving, the freedom from it. That is the noble truth of the cessation of craving. So you get rid of the cause, or the ceasing suffering to cease, you have to get rid of the cause, because there's a cause for everything. There's a cause of suffering, and there's a way that suffering ceases by removing the cause. And then he says, this is the noble way for the leading to the ending of suffering, which is the Noble Eightfold Path that he had already briefly mentioned. And that is the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Can you all still see me out there? I've lost my photo on this.
Yes, yeah, we've lost you also, Bhante.
Yeah, I've got
Yeah.
it. Gotta see how
Click on Zoom. If you click on Zoom, you should go back to the meeting.
Bhante, it looks like screen sharing is on.
Yeah, so just minimize your screen, Bhante. Minimize the screen. Or okay, yes, the screen sharing.
Up on the very top, Bhante, it should say stop sharing the screen.
I never look.
Oh, well, somebody.
Yep.
Oh,
There
wait,
we
Are
go.
you okay now?
I got it back now.
Hmm.
Okay, technical difficulties. Getting what you
Yeah.
don't want, right?
Yeah, that was intentional. Okay.
That was a test for you. Okay, so then he says, having mentioned those Four Noble Truths, he says, thus, bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. So in his state of enlightenment, that was things that hadn't come to his mind before. Things unheard of before. Suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Because with none of his previous teachers, they ever taught the Dhamma in that way. They talked about just meditating, gaining formless jhanas and realizing God or whatever, cosmic consciousness or some other things like that, but they never really formulated a very clear kind of a hypothesis of the problem about suffering. And so that's what the Buddha was most interested in. It was about his whole focus of the meditation was trying to find the cause and the end of suffering. So that light and knowledge and vision of the Four Noble Truths sort of crystallized in the mind. Now, he goes on to explain the three phases of each of those Four Noble Truths. This noble truth of suffering is to be first of all, he says, this is the noble truth of suffering. So that's one. You have to recognize, this is the truth of suffering. This is what suffering is, a whole range, a whole gamut of suffering. And then he says, this truth of suffering is to be fully understood. That means it's not understood yet, but the practice, why we're practicing it, is to fully understand the truth of suffering. And thus, in regard to things unheard of before, there rose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, and light. That means it was the insights that he was getting while he was meditating, that he was undergoing this process of fully understanding it. There's understanding it in terms of intellectual wisdom. There's understanding of it in terms of reflection and thinking, but then there's the understanding of it in terms of the actual deep insights and the realizations, especially of impermanence and no self. And then this truth of suffering has been fully understood. So only when he attained enlightenment that night, he could say, has this noble truth of suffering been fully understood? Because until you reach that path, have that first glimpse of the total cessation of the conditioned mind, then you still haven't fully understood it. And that is what the power of the insight is. And attaining the stream, which we'll mention in a little bit. So those are the three phases of the Four Noble Truths. First is acknowledging this is the truth of suffering. Then this truth of suffering should be fully understood. And then this truth of suffering has been fully understood. So even in our own practice, you should be able to see which of those levels you're at yet. And then he goes on to the second noble truth, the origin. This is the origin of suffering. So that's the first phase, just at least acknowledging, this is the origin of suffering, craving, even if it was just an intellectual ignorance and craving, even if it's just an intellectual understanding. And then this truth of the origin of suffering is to be abandoned. So the first one was to be understood, but the second one, the cause of suffering, is to be abandoned. So that is the work we are practicing on as a Dharma practitioners. We understand it on the intellectual level, but now our practice is actually by practicing all the steps of the Noble Eightfold Path. We're abandoning, in that process, we're abandoning the causes of suffering by weakening our various attachments and ignorance. And then the origin of suffering has been abandoned. Again, only when you attain that state of the at least stream entry, or even the arahantship stage, is the suffering totally abandoned. And then he repeats the same for the cessation of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. Ah, yes. Giving up craving, attainment of Nibbana. That's the cessation of suffering. Okay, that's only an intellectual thought at this point, an idea that you might have. But it spurs you on to want to practice. Then the second part is the cessation of suffering is to be realized. Again, so the point of our practice is to realize the end of suffering. So it's directly conjoined with abandoning the cause, you're realizing the end of suffering. So they kind of go hand in hand. As you are abandoning the cause of suffering, you are realizing the gradual ending of the suffering. Because any type of bad habit or anything else that you give up, you experience that freedom from that agitation or pain brought on by what particular, bad habit or wrong view that you might have had. And then the truth of the cessation of suffering has been realized. So again, that's with the attainment of the arahantship. So in the second part is to be realized. That goes through the stages from the Sotapanna to the once returner to the never returner. That you're gradually removing the causes of suffering and you're gradually realizing the end of suffering, but only in fully realizing it and fully abandoning it, that comes only with the stage of the arahant. And after contemplating those, he says, thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, and wisdom, and light, as per those noble truths. And then he goes on to say the same thing for the Noble Eightfold Path. This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to be, so first of all, this is the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, you can recite, right view, right thought, right knowledge, and so on. Oh, this is the Noble Eightfold Path, yeah. But this path is to be developed. So again, in our practice, that's what we're doing. We're developing the path. We're turning that intellectual knowledge into the realization of the liberation that comes through that practice. And then the Noble Eightfold Path has been developed. So when it's been developed again with those experiences of the stages of, entering the stream, and especially the Arahant stage, it's been fully developed. So actually all those four are realized simultaneously. As you develop your understanding of the truth of suffering, you're abandoning it, because the only way you can realize it is by abandoning it and then realizing the reduction of the suffering. And you only do that through the practice. So all four of those noble truths are actually one kind of unit. And each one develops more or less the same. You can't have the cessation of suffering without realizing the freedom from, or the abandoning suffering. Immediately you realize the freedom that comes through abandoning that suffering and the happiness. And that doesn't come without the practice. So that's why he explained it in that way. Because a lot of people think they understand, I understand suffering, but they haven't really understood it at the deepest levels, because they haven't practiced what's required to reach those liberation of the mind. It's a transformation of consciousness. So having said all that, the Buddha said, "So long, monks, as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths, as they really are, in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, as long as it was not thoroughly purified in this way, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its devas, Mara, and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics, Brahmins, its devas, and humans. But when my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are, in their 3 phases and their 12 aspects," he keeps repeating that, "was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world. And the knowledge and vision arose in me. Unshakable is the liberation of my mind. This is my last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence." And this kind of concludes that talk. So that was the Buddha's proclamation. Unshakable is the liberation of the mind. This is the last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence. And actually, this comes to the actual first words of the Buddha when he attained enlightenment, even before giving this talk, was that through many a long birth I wandered in samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. O house builder, thou art seen. Thou rafters are broken, their ridgepole is shattered. You will no longer build any house. My mind has gone to the unconditioned. Achieved is the end of craving. So those were when the Buddha came out of his deep meditation, and finally got back to where he could, talk. He was so inspired, that was so profound an experience. Those are the first words that he uttered. And naturally, those 5 monks, they got off on that. I mean, they were like, really, really aroused and enthused by this talk, because again, they had never heard the Buddha utter such kind of words, and had never heard such profound talk. And then in the next and while he was giving that talk, or near the end of the talk, there arose in the Venerable Kondanya, one of those 5 monks, the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma. Whatever is subject to origination, all is subject to cessation. So one of those monks, the Kondanya, he realized the first stage of enlightenment, which is called entering the stream, or he became a Sotapanna, which means one who has entered the stream, because he directly had that initial vision of the cessation of suffering, even though it just lasted a short moment or so. It was enough that he broke the 3 fetters and got the true glimpse of Nibbana, or he understood the Four Noble Truths crystallized in his mind at that moment, but it was a short, he couldn't maintain it. But it was such a powerful insight that it broke the 3 lower fetters, something I may talk later in some other talks. But but especially the fetter of the personality belief, or believing in some kind of eternal soul, which was the current belief of the day, and so on. So the one monk became a Sotapanna. And so that validated the Buddha's teaching. And so at the same time, I don't know if you know what devas are, but the devas are celestial beings or invisible beings, sort of like angels that we cannot see with our human eyes, but they can be seen with a clairvoyant eye. And the Buddha could see them because he had developed this power of clairvoyance. So he could see all around. There was many devas listening to his Dhamma talk, because many devas, they want to hear the Dhamma also. And when they heard this Dhamma talk, they also, gave up a loud cry that went up through the realms of the heaven realms, up to the Brahma realm. And it said, and this was setting the wheel in motion of the Dhamma, turning the wheel. That's because Kondanya got it. At least one of the monks got it. So that means the wheel started turning. If none of them would have attained even the first stage of enlightenment, he couldn't have said the turning of the wheel. But because at least one of them got the first stage of enlightenment, he could claim that, this wheel is starting to roll now. And this wheel cannot be turned back. With this wheel of Dhamma cannot be stopped rolling. So the devas were shouting that up through the realms of the heaven realms, passing it up through each successive higher deva realm. And so those devas were witnessing this whole event. And then those devas, earth devas, passed it on to all these successive deva realms. Now, and then, so all the way up to the realm of Brahma, the Brahma lokas also, it is said, that it reached. And an immeasurable glorious radiance appeared in the world, surpassing the divine majesty of the devas. And then the Buddha uttered this inspired utterance. He knew that Kondanya, he knew that one of the monks had attained the first stage of enlightenment. And this monk's name was Kondanya. So he said, Kondanya has indeed understood. Kondanya has understood. Right on. In this way, the Venerable Kondanya, he acquired the name Anya Kondanya. Means one who has understood. And so that kind of concludes the actual sutra, but it was that, that first sermon in which he was able to, awaken at least one of those monks. And the rest of those monks attained enlightenment gradually, little by little. It didn't take too much time. And Asaji, one of those monks, attained, enlightenment by listening to a discourse from Sariputta. But other places in the sutras, the rest of those monks gradually attained the full enlightenment. So that was, within a very short time, 2 weeks or a month, those 5 monks and more, within a few months, had attained enlightenment, and that was the beginning of the Sangha and really the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma that has continued to this day. So, now, I want to open up if any of you have any questions, or if you have your chat chat room available or been writing questions. You can write some questions down on the chat. Let me see where's. There's only one chat. Where is it? So if any of you have any questions you want to write down about anything I was mentioning in the sutta, then go ahead and do that while I'm answering this first question. Well, this question is a little bit overreaching that some of you may not understand, but it says, when Kondanya reached stream entry, at that point were the pure abodes of the previous Buddhas empty? I'm not going to answer that because I have no idea, and it's probably speculation. And so anyway, I don't know the answer to that. Ask somebody who's been there. This is very difficult to answer that. This other question, how do you obtain no rebirth? What was just explained by the Buddha? How did he attain the end of rebirth? Anybody can write that down in the chat. He attained it by practicing understanding the Four Noble Truths, eliminating the cause of suffering, and realizing the end of suffering. But that's realizing it all the way up to the stage of the arahantship, or the full enlightenment. So even Kondanya had not eliminated rebirth, but he eliminated many of the causes that would prolong the rebirth. But anyway, those are kind of a little bit harder to understand, these the 4 stages and so on. So that's a topic for some other time. So the reason that the Buddha and the Devas were so glad that Kondanya got it was that the Buddha was unsure whether to teach at all. Yeah, well, it is said that when the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he was contemplating, as I mentioned briefly, that, oh, this Dhamma is so deep and people are sunk in ignorance and people are not going to be able to understand me. And so that is said that shook the Brahma realm or Sakra, one of the gods. He came down to the Buddha and said, no, please, there are a few people that may understand your Dhamma. Please, out of compassion, for the sake of even just a few, get off your duff and go out and teach the Dhamma. Excuse my language. Go out and teach the Dhamma. So it was said, but by the urging of the Sakka, the king of the gods, that got the Buddha to go out and start teaching. So so when Kondanya, that's why he thought, who could understand this Dhamma first? Now it said when the Buddha first got up from his seat under the Bodhi tree after 7 weeks of meditating there and contemplating, when he got up and started leaving, some ascetic came by and he saw the Buddha's demeanor and some kind of aura around the Buddha, and he stopped, he passing by the Buddha, and he said, "Who are you? Are you a god? Are you?" He said, "No." The Buddha said, "No." "Are you a human being?" He said, "I'm a Buddha." And the guy said, "Wow." And he shook his head like he couldn't even believe it, The guy thought he was pulling his leg, and he went off without questioning the Buddha, anymore. So then the Buddha, as I mentioned, he went and found these 5 monks that were practicing, because those monks had practiced meditation. They could gain the formless jhanas even, these monks. So for them, concentration wasn't very difficult. It just took the Buddha a little bit to tweak their minds over to this idea about the end of suffering, because they haven't really thought about that before. Their idea was just, merge into the light, attain cosmic consciousness, merge with Brahma, whatever they might have believed, but they weren't really contemplating this fact of purifying the mind, and especially of the ego, and going beyond self, because they were addicted to this idea of supreme self. And so the Buddha tweaked it just enough that they could overcome that. And and then Kondanya was able to do that. Okay, you probably better stop writing questions, because I don't think I'll be able to get through all of these. When the middle way between asceticism and hedonism was established, at that moment, that was when the Buddha attained enlightenment. The 4 noble truths crystallized in his mind, and so did the middle path, because he had all that previous experience to draw on. And he realized that the reason why he was stuck is because he has been going from one extreme to the other, going from being a prince and all the sensual pleasures you could imagine, to going to extreme asceticism and torturing the body, and there was no in between. So it got him to think, and either of those extremes, he didn't have any realization. So it's in that. Because he gave up. So actually, no, he started practicing the middle path when he left those monks. But the way he lived, any of you would think it's asceticism. But, he was practicing what he called the middle path, but it was still, for the average person, probably something no one else would do. Such as like limiting your meal to just 1 time a day. But not starving your body, but eat it enough to at least that you have enough strength. Maybe just one basic meal a day was enough that he needed to maintain his strength, but not torturing the body and so on. He was realizing the middle path as he was practicing, but then when he attained the actual enlightenment, that's when it became very crystal clear. Next question is, what is the 12 permutation knowledge? I spent the whole talk explaining that. It's the three phases of each of the 4 noble truths. So that's the 12 stages. Acknowledging, the truth of suffering exists. And this truth needs to be understood. This truth has been understood by reaching the enlightenment, and then the same with the other 3 noble truths. So that's the 12, what's called the 3 phases and the 12, 4 rounds, or however it's, they mention it. It's just a way of fully understanding it. It's like shining a light on something. Let's say you have a flashlight and you want to see something, and you shine it only on the face. Okay, you see the face, you can understand something, but if you go around it, you examine the side, you might see some marks on his ears or something. You go to the back side, you go to the other side. So you're illuminating all four sides of an object. So you get a more complete picture as if you just look on one side. So that's why the Buddha examined these things in all these various ways. And in the same way it was with other aspects of the teaching. Can you talk about how greed, aversion, and delusion keeps us from seeing, understanding, suffering? That's a whole nother talk in itself. Well, that's why greed, attachment, and delusion, these are called the three roots of suffering. Greed, hatred, and delusion, or lobha, dosa, and moha. And that's what prevents us. So the whole Noble Eightfold Path, the practice, is about weakening greed, hatred, and delusion. But, and so that's why right understanding comes at the beginning of the Eightfold Path. To develop, that's beginning to weaken the delusions or weaken ignorance. And when you start to understand, like understanding the law of karma, for example, we're going to talk about that more later. But so it's when you start to read the Dhamma that then you see the need for, you see the pain of having greed and the pain that comes from us from being so attached and so on. So it's just a matter of gaining that understanding. As the comprehension and cessation of each step arise through successful vipassana meditation. Well, the cessation of each step doesn't arise separately, they arise simultaneously. You don't reach the cessation of suffering without, you don't reach the end of craving without reaching the end of suffering. And you don't reach the end of that until you've reached the end of the Eightfold Path. So they don't arise separately, they arise simultaneously. Although you get glimpses of them, of course, little by little as you practice. And it can arise, yes, through mindfulness meditation, vipassana meditation. That's one of the most direct ways. Yes, and in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is basically the foundation of vipassana meditation, 4 foundations of mindfulness, you read that sutta starts with, this is the direct way for overcoming sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, abolishing ignorance, and arising the enlightenment. So really the 4 foundations of mindfulness are vipassana meditation if you practice it in the right way. Oh, somebody from Brazil, I have a doubt. Who are the Maras? Let's don't get into that. Maras basically is the delusions within your own mind. Maras in your own mind. That means the little self in your mind that doesn't want you to proceed on the spiritual path. Mara wants you to keep your attachments. It wants you to keep your greed, hatred, and delusion, because that's the way he controls you. And the ego doesn't want to let those go. So basically, maybe in a sutta, Mara appeared to be an actual person, I don't know. But for the practical purposes of our practice, understand Mara as being the delusion that, like you're supposed to get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and Mara says, oh, it's such a nice day. Why don't you sleep another hour? You know, you stayed up late last, you know, get another hour's sleep. Then when you get up, you have no time to meditate. So Mara is that kind of little voice in you, or that side of the devil, you might say, that tries to keep us from giving our full effort to the practice. So you could see that, you know, to use Christian terms, the God and the devil, those are in our mind. The God in us wants to attain liberation, enlightenment. The devil wants us to stay connected to suffering and samsara. What is the difference between a skillful desire to attain arahantship and the craving that shackles us to samsara? Well, even though we have a desire to attain enlightenment, that desire, unless you practice the steps, unless you develop the 5 spiritual faculties and develop the Eightfold Path to a high degree, most people don't practice to that high degree to the extent that they're going to overcome those shackles, because most people don't have the right conditions at home, or the time, or they might have some other unconscious blocks that is going to make it more difficult. So we can never predict that what kind of karmic obstacles and blocks we still have deep within us. But the only thing is you try to practice the best you can, and little by little, it's not going to come quick for most people. And you know, it's a whole lifetime of practice for most people, or several lifetimes. Even with the attainment of Sotapanna, it is said that a person still has enough karmic blocks that it'll take 7 more lifetimes to overcome them. Now, it could be reached in that one lifetime, but if the person was very negligent, it could take them, 7 more lifetimes to reach full enlightenment. So you can see from that how deep-rooted greed, hatred, and delusion are. And we can't expect that even a few years of practice, or even 40 or 50 years of practice, is necessarily going to bring you enlightenment, because we've been spending many lifetimes, hundreds, thousands of lifetimes, accumulating greed, hatred, and delusion. And to think you're going to overcome it by just a few retreats or a few years, or even in this lifetime, it could be, but if you cling to it too tightly, you're going to be disappointed. You may be disappointed. So you also have to not have attachment to that too tightly that it imbalances your practice. But the craving to be free from suffering is a good craving, but it has to be balanced with the right view. You have to have the middle path on that too, understanding the realities that are there. Otherwise, why didn't all of you become a monk or a nun? Because you had karmic blocks for one reason. Oh, I wanted to get married. I wanted to get a job. I want to have kids. Well, I didn't. I mean, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, when I decided to become a monk, that was before I had any of those kind of desires. But each person is different. So, that's what we're up against. Okay. Okay, we're gonna end this pretty. I think this is one last question. If one is able to abandon clinging to the 5 aggregates, it seems that the suffering of the body, mental suffering ends, mental afflictions ends. Is that correct? That's correct, but only with the enlightenment. That's when you abandon clinging to the 5 aggregates is at least starting when you attain the Sotapanna stage and gradually up to the Arhat stage. Because the Sotapanna can still have sensual desires, but it wouldn't lead them to breaking any of the serious precepts that would cause them to be reborn in a lower realm. But they could still have sensual pleasure, have sexual desire, as long as it wasn't hurting somebody else and they didn't abuse it. They still have those desires. So that's clinging to the aggregates. Even though they have some right understanding, they still have this craving and aversion, even a Sotapanna. And even a once returner is only reduced craving and aversion, let's say 80 or 90%, who knows exactly, but they still have residual amounts of that. So you can see how, and that would be attachment to the aggregates too. So that shows you how deep rooted it is. Okay, friends, so I think that's the conclusion of this portion. And we, for those who want to stay on, we'll do I'm going to give a guided meditation. And so those who maybe you're overseas and it's in the middle of the night for you, or early morning and so on, you can sign off if you like. Otherwise, those who want to have a short meditation, maybe it will just be a half an hour or so. But first, we're going to take a little stretch. And so, because you've been sitting a long time, stand up. And I'm going to lead you through a few simple stretches. Those who've been on retreats with me before, they basically know what simple kind of stretches, just a few of them, just to kind of get the feel of the body. And then we'll have I'll be giving a guided meditation. Okay? So just take a break for a minute or two and kind of find a place to stand up where you can see your screen so you can observe me. Although I'm going to be talking through the exercise so you can hear me if you can't see me to follow the exercise.
Right,
you can hear him, but he cannot hear you, right? You have muted your own mic.
yeah, start video.
Yeah, please mute all your mics.
But if you start your video, he will see your face.
Sadhu Bhante.
Okay, start to stand straight. Feel your feet pressing the floor. Relax your arms and hands at the sides. Just gently close the eyes and just feel the standing body. Feel the feet pressing the floor, the arms and hands at the sides. Feel your head balanced on top of the neck. And just mentally remind yourself of the present moment of just standing, standing, standing. Then begin taking some deep, slow breaths. Try to take about 3 seconds to expand your abdomen, rib cage, and chest, drawing the air into the upper chest. Hold the air in the lungs for 2 or 3 seconds. And then slowly let out the breath. Feel the relaxing contractions of the out breath. Just think like this to yourself, taking a few more deep breaths. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Now we coordinate these movements with that same breathing. We do the movement while breathing in, holding the position for a couple seconds, and then returning to the starting point on the out breath. We'll repeat each one 3 times, try to coordinate the breathing with the movements. So you can open the eyes and kind of watch me. So on the next in breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back and stretch upwards. On the out breath, turn the palms down and touch the top of your head. Next in breath, palms up, straighten the arms, head back, stretch up. Out breath, touch the top of the head. Once more, in breath, palms up, straighten the arms, head back. Hold that a little longer. Now release your fingers on the out breath, lower the arms back to the sides. And relax, just close the eyes, feel your feet pressing the floor. You can just feel the standing body. Maybe try to feel the subtle pulsation in your hands or fingers. Just let your thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Just keep the feeling of the body in the front of the awareness. Just remind yourself, standing, standing, standing. On the next in breath, want to push up on the toes while raising the arms up like this over the head, face the palms toward each other and stretch upwards to touch the ceiling. And the out breath, come back, heels to the floor, arms back to the sides. So use the breathing to help lift and lower the body. In the in breath, lift up. Stretch. Out. Once more, in. Out. Just close the eyes, feel the body. Try to feel the increased body sensations generated by the breathing and the exercise. Just remind yourself, standing, standing, standing. Next, we'll do side bending using both arms. On the next in-breath, raise both arms over the head like this. Try to keep your fingers and arms straight, close to the head. On the out-breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can. On the in-breath, lift back up. Pause a moment. And out-breath, the other side. In-breath up. Again to the right, out-breath. In. Out-breath to the left. In. And once more, side, out-breath to the right. Out-breath left. In. On the out-breath, lower both arms back to the sides. And relax. And try to feel the increased subtle pulsations, especially in the hands and fingers. Just feel where the clothing touches the skin of the arms, chest, the shoulders. Just try to feel that increased aliveness of the body, organic aliveness, vibrations of the body. One last exercise, we'll do head turning. So on an in-breath, turn your head to the right as far as you comfortably can. Try to look over your right shoulder. On the out breath, all the way back to the left, look over the left shoulder. In breath to the right, concentrate into the neck vertebrae, or feel or imagining them loosening up. Out breath left. In breath right. Out breath left. The next in breath, let the head stop in the center. Just feel the whole body. Try to mentally feel the outline of the standing body, feet pressing the floor, the arms and hands at the side, the head on top. What we call whole body awareness. Present moment awareness. Okay, so now go ahead and sit back down in the meditation posture. If you want to sit on the floor, you can, or sit in the chair. How many of you having done those exercises, could feel some little increased sensations in the body from doing those simple exercises. Can you just raise your hand? That's the purpose of doing them, actually, because our meditation practice starts by learning how to stay focused and grounded in the breathing body, feeling the aliveness and the sensations of breathing and other body sensations. So just try to keep the head and the back in a straight line. Try not to lean up against something. Try to use the strength of your back muscles to hold the posture straight. Just rest the hands in the lap or rest them on your legs. Just gently close the eyes. First of all, just really feel the body sitting on the floor. Feel that weight of the body pressing the buttocks and feet on the floor. And just imagine that your body weight is pressing the body on the seat. Then feel your hands and fingers touching. And gently straighten up the back. And feel the head balanced on top of the neck. Try to keep the chin parallel or level with the floor. Just feel that awake posture. Relax your face muscles. Relax your eyes. Just try to mentally feel that outline of the sitting body, that general sense of the feet underneath, the arms at the sides, the head on top, clothing touching the skin on different places. Just mentally remember sitting, sitting, sitting. It's the present moment of the body. If you still have your mics on, please mute them. Then begin taking a few deep, slow breaths. It's like we are doing during the yoga exercise, sort of fill up the whole lungs from the bottom to the top, hold the air in the lungs for 2 or 3 seconds, allow the oxygen to get into the bloodstream, and slowly let the breath out, feeling the relaxing contractions of the out breath. Just take a few more breaths like that, thinking like this to yourself. Just breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Now we're going to do an exercise in counting the breaths from 1 to 10 to try to get a better concentration. So keep the attention focused on the movements of the abdomen, rib cage, or chest. And you can take some slightly deeper breaths if you can. I hope concentrate. With the next in-breath, mentally count to 1. With the contracting out breath, also count 1. The next expanding in-breath, 2. Contracting out breath, 2. In breath, 3. Out breath, 3. In breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In breath, 5. Out breath, 5. In breath, 6. Out breath, 6. In breath, 7. Out breath, 7. In breath, 8. Out breath, 8. In breath, 9. Out breath, 9. In breath, 10. Out breath, 10. Now discontinue the counting. Discontinue any controlling the breath. Let the breath return to its uncontrolled rhythm, but continue to follow it, to feel it, to notice it. Just try to notice and feel the sensations of the clothing rubbing against the belly, skin, of the stomach, abdomen, rib cage, or chest that expands and contracts. Just try to make that the main focus of your concentrated awareness. Simply knowing when the breath is coming in and knowing when the breath is going out. The knowing is that precise awareness. You can make these brief mental notes to help you remember. Just breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Or in, sitting. Out, sitting. Just remember that much. It's not much to remember. In sitting, out sitting. It's the ongoing, continuous, present moment of the body. And try to notice how each breath is different. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Sometimes you feel it more in the abdomen, sometimes you feel it more in the rib cage or chest. It's always changing. That clarity of the mind is sharpening your mindfulness. Sometimes it's an easy breath, sometimes a difficult breath. It's like looking through a microscope, just focusing the attention down there in the center of the body. In sitting, out sitting. Try to notice the brief pauses between the breaths. After the in-breath, there's a brief pause, just a fraction of a second. And after the out-breath, there's a brief pause. Noticing those pauses is very important. Normally our mind wanders in the pauses. If we're aware of the pause, we've never been aware of the pause. The pause connects the out-breath to the in-breath, and the in-breath to the out-breath. So feeling the whole in-breath and the pause. The whole out-breath and the pause. It's the way you gain concentration. During those pauses, try to feel the outline or vibrations, subtle vibrations of the body. If the mind gets lost in thoughts, carried away by thoughts, recognize it as lost. Take a deep breath, bring the mind back into the body, back to in sitting. out, out, sitting, breath by breath, moment by moment. If you have too many thoughts, go back to do some deep, slow breathing to help stay more concentrated, centered in the body. Or you can count your breaths from 1 to 10 by yourself to help concentrate. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. That ongoing connection to the present moment. The thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Sounds may come and go. Other body sensations may come and go. The body keeps sitting and breathing. Sitting and breathing. Sitting and breathing. If we lose that connection to the breathing body, the present moment, the mind gets easily pushed and pulled around, disturbed by the various sense impressions or thoughts, sinks under the weight of heavy emotions. That constant connection to the breathing body is the natural life preserver, the natural lifeline to the present moment. It's always there, just beneath your nose. This breathing body. Try to feel subtler and subtler sensations coming and going in or around the breathing process. itching, scratching sensations, prickling sensations, aches or pain. They just come and go in the background. The body keeps sitting and breathing. Just keep relaxing the body and mind. With each out breath, as the body lets go of the breath, the mind lets go of the past and future. Even while you're doing the meditation, you could also reflect or contemplate the noble truths. Oh, this is suffering. This is the cause of suffering, the ending of suffering, as you see it occurring in your consciousness and body. It's not abstract as it happens. Something agitates your mind. Oh, this is suffering. What is the cause of it? Your attachment. What is the end of it? Your letting go of attachment. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Always coming back to reground, recenter, whenever the mind gets distracted. Anicca sabbe sankhara aniccati yada panyaya pasati atanibindati dukkhi Esamago visuddhiya dukkha patta ca nidukkha bhaya patta ca nibbaya soka patta ca nisoka Hontu sabbe pipanino. All conditioned things, the five aggregates of this body, mind, and world are impermanent. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to freedom. And may the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. In this way, may all beings live with mindfulness and wisdom. And thus spoke the Buddha. And finish, if you'd like to join in chanting the word sadhu 3 times slowly. We chant that on a long out breath. Take a deep breath. Sadhu. Sadhu. place your hands at the edge of your knees. And on the next in-breath, stretch your head back as far as you comfortably can and arch your lower spine. Pull the hands against the knees to help arch backward. Then lift the head up on an in-breath. Press the chin to the top of the chest on the out-breath. To stretch the neck vertebrae. Then lift the head up level on an in-breath. And relax on the out-breath. And try to still kind of feel the body a little bit. So, friends, it brings our evening Sutta study and meditation to an end. So I hope that everybody could at least perhaps get a little bit of insights or maybe some better understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And so I think everyone's getting the announcements now about these programs? You shake your head one way or another. So I will usually try to send out a reminder the day before the program. Now we have a children's Dhamma school program on Saturdays, but it's mostly for the Sri Lankan children from their Dhamma schools in different places. So it's geared for that age level. But on Sunday afternoon, that's on Saturday afternoon at 3, but on Sunday afternoons at 2, we'll have another Dhamma talk and Q&A and the meditation session. So I'm glad you could all participate this evening, and I wish you the best. And anyway, still try to, how many people since the last Sunday, were able to practice an M&M at least a few times, once a day or a couple of times a day? Do your homework.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, well, continue to try to do that and do your evening and morning meditations, because it's only with regular meditation that little by little those insights, and as you gain some better concentration, and then those insights, you'll get little deeper insights. You say, that's what suffering is. Okay, yeah, or that's the cause of suffering. You get little insights, even however small, they're very important. Those little insights, and that's the way gradually they gradually accumulate, and then eventually they become big insights that have a very powerful effect on you. So okay, so friends, good night. Get a good night's sleep. If you're just waking up in the morning, if you live in India or in Sri Lanka. Okay. Well,
Good night, Bhante.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Bhante.
If anybody wants to hang on for a minute and talk to me or has any question, you can do that. I'll stay on for a few minutes. If anybody, the rest of you can sign out. But everybody talking at once. I see a Fabiana is there. Is that the Fabiana from Portugal? Or another Fabiana?
It's Fabiana from São Paulo, Bhante, from Casa de Dharma.
Yes, Casa de Dharma. Hola. Tudo bem?
Yeah, tudo bem.
Very
Very happy to see you, and Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Nice to see you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how many people were signed, were listening this evening? I forgot. Did anybody?
About 60, something like that, 65.
At the most crowded time, people might have left after the Dhamma talk. It's getting late. People from Germany, there's several people from Europe or even India and Sri Lanka very early in the morning.
Before the Dharma talk ended, there were the total number that I saw was 62.
Okay.
When you mentioned a few minutes ago, this is my first time joining you, practicing M&Ms. What is M&Ms? Meditation and something else? Metta?
A minute meditation. That's a training that you stop yourself every hour for 1 minute.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember Bhante Gunaratana recommending that.
Yeah, and just bring your mind to the body, take a few deep breaths, basically let go of the past and the future, just try to feel the body, feel that kind of, just like parking your mind in neutral gear, like you put your gear shift of your car in neutral, we put our mind in neutral, but feeling the breathing in the body, because that's always the connection, immediate connection to the present moment. And or you can even practice forgiveness and metta in that hour. If somebody crossed you or did something you're holding some ill feeling about, you can, even in the space of 30 seconds, 45 seconds, may they be well and happy, free from suffering. Or forgive yourself if you did something unmindful. The main thing is you try to let go of any negativity or stress you might have been holding in that hour, to let it go so you don't take it into the next hour. And if you can do that every hour during the day, by the time at the end of the day, you won't feel so stressed out, and maybe you'll feel more like meditating. You'll feel more peaceful and calm. So Fabiana, you can see in the background, this is the inside of our Lion of Wisdom Meditation Center here in Maryland.
Beautiful.
You see there's a tiger on the left side.
Yeah. I
That's
thought it was a cat, but
That's
it's a
our
tiger.
mascot.
Ah,
It is a cat. It's just a big cat.
yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be a lion. Okay, friends, I'm going to go ahead and sign out then. Okay, so we'll see you again.
Yes.
All the best.
Yes, Bhante.
Don't forget, mindfulness a day keeps dukkha away. Or you could say M&Ms a day keep dukkha away.
And when is the next time?
Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Okay, Eastern Standard Time.
Do you have the list?
Do I have the list? No, but a friend of mine does.
The invitation list, yeah, I think Dave has that, right?
Bob, me.
Anyway, yeah, if you got on this time, you'll be able to get on next time. It's the same idea. Okay.